I literally didn't hit record, so try again. All right, friends, welcome back to the 11th episode of Season 2. I can't believe it. And if you've been with me throughout, I gotta thank you. This is tremendous that we've gone so far together. If you haven't, I guess there's 22 other episodes for you to binge into if you kind of fell into this one somehow. Now, throughout Season 2, we have been talking about trying to figure out who we are. Because as I've said, we're going to get into community and who we interact with, how we interact with other people for Season 3. But here we're still focused on us, as if in a vacuum of sorts. Now, for those first 10 episodes, we've been trying in many different ways to collect an inventory of those things that make us come alive. And we recognized, as of the last episode, that these heirlooms, as I called them, may be the traditional things that make you come alive, that you love to focus your energies on resilience and courage and happiness and mentorship and all things that make you feel good, that you want to talk about with other people. And then there are other things that make you come alive in the form of fears. And I talked about many things that you can be scared of, and I see that as being a different word than fears. I, for the purposes of no other life, consider something that you're scared of to be a physical thing that may or may not be terribly rational. But if you ask why, you will eventually get to an intangible thing that causes you anxiety and fear. And it makes you come alive. It influences decisions that you make in the world. And at the very beginning of this season, we were talking a lot about a tree, and I called it the tree of possibility. And this tree of possibility was extremely helpful to figure out who we are today and how we got there. But it works in reverse. So in order to work forward, in order to work presently even, we kind of need to change that model. And as we change the model, we develop into something which I now present to you that I call the tree of you. And the tree of you is a bit different. You can still picture it as a deciduous tree. The image for me is an apple tree here in New England, perhaps, the trunk that goes up into this beautiful canopy full of fruits, flowers, and leaves. If you're familiar with the Shaker community here in the United States, they always have a tree called the Tree of Life. And if you know that image, it's exactly the design that I'm thinking of here. But you can look up tree on your search provider of choice and see what I'm talking about if you don't know. I kid. But on the tree of you, each one of those heirlooms that we talked about is represented by a limb. And a limb that comes out of the trunk forms the basis of that beautiful, hopefully symmetric shape. And on this tree, every stimulus that you encounter is represented by a growth season. Now, this is where we begin to realize that this is not to scale, whereas a regular tree has one growth cycle per earth year. I have told you, and stand by, you probably encounter 1 million stimuli per day, because they're everything that your eyes, ears, nose, mouth, they all take in constantly. And every single thing can be broken down into many more things. So you walk out of the house and you're bombarded by colors and sights and sounds and so on. So we're not talking about a growth cycle per year. Now, fortunately, these millions of stimuli tend to be of the unremarkable value. So you see or experience one, and it falls by the wayside. In this analogy, it becomes a leaf, and at the end of the growth cycle, it lands on the ground. It may inform the tree's future somehow through the nutrients that it will take in through its roots and the water and all that. But that comes out later in season 3. What I want to focus on is the remarkable stimuli, because you know from season 1 that these are what become the catalysts that drive the change in our life. And without change in our life, we would have a very meaningless and generic, very boring life. So a remarkable stimulus comes along, and it's represented as a growth cycle. So you have all of these limbs represented by these heirlooms of yours, the things that make you come alive. And in order to have a properly symmetrical tree, you need to honor each and every one of those things that makes you come alive. The good, the proud, the sad, the negative, anything that influences you regularly. And you know now that you have this comprehensive inventory because you've worked at it for 10 weeks. And here we are, time to employ it. So you meet up with this remarkable stimulus, and you're trying to figure out whether to act on it. And so during that adjustment phase per season 1, or growth cycle per episode 2-11, you are going to rely on certain heirlooms. And you may find that this one really tries your patience, and you end up succeeding at choosing the resolution because you employed your patience. But if you also relied and looked into and recognized all of the others, then this is what will happen. That patience limb will get a piece of beautiful heirloom fruit. Heirloom, ooh, see what I did? So that becomes your heirloom fruit. Now, all of the other limbs, all of the other branches that have been honored and taken into consideration will have their energy not driven toward a beautiful fruit, tasty, delicious heirloom fruit, but rather a beautiful flower. Now, there is one other type of bud on a tree. You can have fruit, flower, or leaves. And so anything that you ignored will become just a leaf. And that leaf may become a branch, and it may grow. And if you ignore that long enough, all of that symmetry will be clouded by this one leggy branch that is coming out and going off in its own direction. And we've seen this when we drive by a massive arbor of trees, and then they're all beautiful, but some of them just have this limb that comes out and living a life of its own. And that will continue as long as you ignore that part of you. Now, if you took it into consideration and you didn't really rely on it, well, this particular lineage, this particular limb or heirloom, is not going to flower. It's not going to make fruit. it'll just stay dormant for a moment. It's kind of like a fallow season for that limb. And what ends up happening is that if you recognize all these parts, but you're not living by them, then over time that canopy will get fleshed out in a way that there might be some branches lying around inside of that canopy that don't alter its silhouette, that don't make a significant change. They're there. Some days they might be the one that you rely on and they bear fruit. It might be bad fruit if you are putting all of your energy into the fear heirloom at that point. But that is the way that it's going to continue. And you want to live with the symmetry of this tree of you. So what that means is at each and every adjustment phase that you go through, you need to be recognizing and aware that all that you have designed throughout this entire season as being first something that mattered to you, and later that we would call making you come alive, heirloom, whatever it is that we want to call it, you've got to recognize it. And anything that you don't recognize will cause trouble. It will, at the very least, stop the beauty that was working toward that tree. So it's just a silly little image. You can take it or leave it, but if you do begin to think about it, the reasons that this will help you is because, honestly, you're going to realize that you need to draw from all of you. You don't want to always go to the bat. You always go to bat on utilizing patience, but then ignoring your timeliness or your productivity or your love. Like, these are all part of it. And your tree is going to be completely unique to everybody else's because you are the only person that has that same collection, that same proportion of heirlooms in your life. It's pretty neat to think about, and we will revisit it yet again in season 3. So I hope you'll come back for the final episode in 1 week's time. And in the meantime, think about your tree and take care of yourself, friends. You have no other life.